In today's video, we're looking at 5 dumbest animal attacks ever recorded. From a tourist who thought he could mount a camel without help, to a 12-year-old who decided stealing fruit from a monkey colony was worth the risk. But first, we begin in Brazil, where a boy was warned over and over again to stay away from his neighbor's pit bull, but proceeded anyway. It was March 14, 2016, and the narrow streets near the border of Vila Madalena and Consolação buzzed with the usual afternoon chaos. Children weaving between parked cars, vendors shouting prices over sputtering radios, the smell of frying oil drifting from corner stalls. 10-year-old Tiago Ventresca had already been scolded twice that day for wandering too far from his apartment building. Tiago was known throughout the neighborhood as the boy who never listened. His mother, Maria, worked double shifts at a textile factory, leaving him in the care of his elderly grandmother, who struggled to keep up with his boundless curiosity. Local residents mentioned that he had been caught climbing construction scaffolding, chasing stray cats into traffic, and attempting to feed pigeons from third-story window ledges. That afternoon, Tiago had been specifically forbidden from playing near the Oliveira house on Rua Augusta, where a pit bull lived behind a chain-link fence. The dog belonged to Carlos Oliveira, a mechanic who had rescued the animal from a fighting ring 2 years earlier. Despite Carlos's efforts at rehabilitation, Rex remained deeply traumatized and aggressive towards strangers. The neighborhood children had been warned repeatedly to stay away from the property. No secondary fencing or locked gates had been installed, a clear containment failure. Pit bulls possess exceptionally strong jaw muscles and a grip-and-hold bite style that allows them to maintain pressure once they latch on. Originally bred for bull baiting, they exhibit a behavioral trait called gameness, the tendency to continue an attack despite pain or distraction. The warnings had been constant and were later corroborated by neighbor testimony and municipal animal control records. A lady who lived next door to the Oliveiras had personally told Tiago's grandmother about the dangerous dog at least 3 times. Police and municipal animal control records, as well as neighbor testimony, documented at least 2 prior bites to adults who had gotten too close to the fence. Even the local mail carrier had switched to leaving packages at the building entrance rather than approaching the Oliveira gate. That morning, Tiago's grandmother had specifically reminded him about the house with the chain-link fence and made him promise to stay away. She had no realistic way to physically restrain him. But as Tiago played soccer with friends in the narrow street, the ball rolled directly toward the Oliveira property. His friends hung back, remembering their parents' warnings, but they said that Tiago approached the fence. Through the metal links, they could see the dog lying in the shade of a small concrete shelter. The dog appeared calm, almost sleepy in the afternoon heat. Tiago proceeded to climb the fence. The attack began the moment Tiago's sneakers touched the ground inside the fence. Rex moved with explosive speed, covering the 15 feet between his shelter and the intruder in less than 2 seconds. The dog's jaws clamped onto Tiago's neck beneath the jawline, canine teeth tearing into soft tissue. The crushing force collapsed his airway while severing a carotid vessel, causing rapid blood loss and oxygen deprivation. The pit bull's instinctive response was to shake his head violently from side to side, a behavior designed to break the neck of prey animals. Tiago's body was partially lifted off the ground and dragged due to his small size and the dog's strength. Tiago likely lost consciousness within seconds. Severe blood loss and airway obstruction made survival impossible, and despite frantic attempts to intervene, irreversible injuries led to death within minutes. His arms flailed weakly for several seconds before going limp. A woman who had been hanging laundry on her balcony witnessed the entire attack and began screaming for help while fumbling for her cell phone. Other neighbors rushed to the fence, shouting and throwing rocks at the dog, but it maintained its grip. Carlos Oliveira, hearing the commotion from his garage, ran toward the yard with a crowbar, but by the time he reached the scene, Tiago had already lost consciousness. The mechanic struck his own dog repeatedly before finally releasing his hold. Paramedics arrived 6 minutes later to find Tiago lying motionless in a pool of blood, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Despite immediate attempts at resuscitation, he was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner's preliminary report noted massive trauma to the cervical spine, severe crushing injuries to the neck with arterial rupture and airway collapse, and significant damage to the trachea consistent with a large dog attack. The dog was euthanized the following day, and Carlos Oliveira moved away within the month. The community installed higher fences and stricter regulations about dangerous animals, including mandatory registration, muzzling in public, and locked enclosures for aggressive dogs. Yet even as Tiago's story served as a grim reminder that warnings exist for a reason. In Dubai, a tourist would ignore the calm demeanor of a seemingly docile camel, unaware that this desert giant could deliver bone-crushing force. It was March 15th, 2017, and the scorching Dubai sun had already begun its relentless assault on the desert landscape by 9 a.m., setting the scene for a horrific animal attack. Liam Fawkes was a 29-year-old software developer from Portland, Oregon, with a curated life of adventure tourism and extreme sports. His colleagues knew him as the guy who would book the most dangerous excursions on every vacation: bungee jumping in New Zealand, cage diving with sharks in South Africa, volcano hiking in Guatemala. This trip to Dubai was meant to be a brief stopover before heading to Nepal for a solo trek to Everest Base Camp. But Liam had insisted on squeezing in every possible experience the Emirates had to offer. His reputation for pushing boundaries had earned him both admiration and concern from friends back home. Liam often dismissed safety protocols as obstacles to authentic experiences. He had arrived at the Al Sara Desert Resort that morning, specifically seeking what he called real camel riding, not the sanitized tourist version with guides holding lead ropes. Dromedary camels stand up to 7 feet tall at the shoulder and can weigh over 1,400 pounds. Their powerful legs evolved to carry massive loads across unforgiving terrain. Most critically, these animals possess a kick force capable of fracturing multiple ribs and causing fatal internal injuries. Their legs become lethal weapons when the animal feels threatened or cornered. The facility's safety warnings were posted in 4 languages on a weathered sign near the entrance, explicitly stating that visitors must remain with guides at all times and never approach the animals unaccompanied. The head handler had personally briefed Liam's tour group about camel behavior, explaining that these animals could be unpredictable and that their size made them inherently dangerous. He specifically warned against sudden movements and emphasized that camels, despite their docile appearance, were prey animals with powerful defensive instincts. Liam had nodded along with the others, but was already eyeing a large male camel named Hakim, who stood slightly apart from the herd. The enclosure was separated by a low gate. As the guided portion of the tour concluded, Liam lingered behind while other tourists headed toward the gift shop. He approached the handler and asked about riding Hakim independently, claiming he had extensive experience with large animals from his childhood on a ranch, a fabrication designed to gain access. When the handler firmly declined and began walking toward the main building, Liam made his fatal decision. He waited until the handler was out of sight, then climbed over the low barrier to approach Hakim's enclosure. The attack unfolded with shocking speed and violence. As Liam attempted to grab Hakim's neck to pull himself up, the camel's ears flattened against his head, a clear warning sign that Liam didn't recognize. Hakim's massive head swung around, his lips curling back to reveal yellowed teeth as he issued a low, threatening grunt. When Liam persisted, trying to swing his leg over the camel's back, Hakim's response was immediate and devastating. The camel's hind leg shot backward with explosive force that caught Liam squarely in the center of his chest. The impact lifted him completely off the ground and sent him flying several feet backward before he crashed face first into the sand. The sound of the kick, a sickening thud followed by the sharp crack of breaking ribs, echoed across the facility. Liam lay motionless for several seconds before attempting to push himself up. Multiple ribs had been driven inward, puncturing lung tissue and rupturing internal vessels. Massive internal bleeding began almost immediately, blood already beginning to foam at the corners of his mouth. His breathing became rapid and shallow as his left lung began collapsing almost immediately, each breath producing a wet, rattling sound. He managed to roll onto his back, his face contorting in agony as he clutched at his chest, but the damage was already catastrophic. The handler heard his colleague's commotion and came running, immediately recognizing the severity of Liam's injuries. As Liam's breathing became increasingly labored, the handler called emergency services while his assistant attempted basic first aid. Liam remained conscious for nearly 10 minutes. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, but paramedics quickly determined that Liam's injuries were beyond field treatment. He was rushed to the hospital, where emergency surgery revealed massive internal trauma, 7 fractured ribs, a completely collapsed left lung, severe damage to his spleen, and extensive internal bleeding. Despite 3 hours of surgery, Liam died from his injuries. The facility temporarily closed the camel's enclosure for investigation by local authorities, issued a revised safety protocol requiring guides to remain with visitors at all times, and reinforced barriers around all camel pens. Liam's body was repatriated to Oregon. As the desert sands of Dubai bore witness to one tourist's fatal miscalculation, in Australia, a drunken fisherman would wade into the shallows to retrieve a beer cooler, completely unaware that ancient eyes were already tracking him. It was March 14th, 2015, and the humid air along the Adelaide River hung thick with the promise of another scorching Australian afternoon, where the muddy waters concealed predators that had remained unchanged since the age of dinosaurs. Elliot Brame was a 42-year-old diesel mechanic from Catherine, known throughout the Northern Territory for his ability to resurrect dead engines and his equally legendary capacity for beer. His reputation for working miracles on broken-down road trains had earned him steady work across the remote mining camps. Elliot had driven down to Darwin for the weekend with 3 friends, celebrating the completion of a contract. The group had chosen a familiar fishing spot along the Adelaide River, a stretch of muddy bank where Elliot had been coming for over a decade. He prided himself on knowing these waters better than most tourists. His friends respected his local knowledge, though they'd grown accustomed to his habit of dismissing safety warnings. The area was a public fishing zone with no barriers separating visitors from the river, making alcohol consumption near the bank especially hazardous. The Adelaide River system harbors some of Australia's largest saltwater crocodiles, apex predators that can exceed 20 feet in length and weigh over 2,000 pounds. These ancient reptiles possess the strongest bite force of any living animal, over 3,700 pounds per square inch, and can remain motionless for hours before exploding into action at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour in short bursts. By mid-afternoon, the group had consumed most of their beer supply. The group had noticed several crocodiles basking on the opposite bank earlier. The bright yellow warning signs posted every 50 yards along the riverbank clearly stated to not swim due to crocodiles lurking, but Elliot had always viewed them as suggestions rather than absolute prohibitions. When his friend mentioned seeing a large crocodile slide into the water near their fishing spot an hour earlier, Elliot had laughed it off, claiming the animals were more afraid of them. The accident began when Elliot, reaching for another beer, accidentally knocked over the cooler with his elbow. The plastic container tumbled down the muddy bank and splashed into the river, immediately beginning to drift toward the center of the channel. Inside were at least a dozen unopened bottles, representing the remainder of their afternoon's entertainment. Without hesitation, Elliot stood up, his movements slightly unsteady from the alcohol, and announced his intention to retrieve it. His friends called out warnings, but Elliot was already pulling off his boots and wading into the murky water fully clothed. The water was deeper than they'd anticipated, reaching his chest within a few steps. The cooler bobbed just beyond his reach, forcing him to wade deeper. Elliot's alcohol-impaired judgment led him to underestimate both the river's depth and the distance to his targe, forcing him to begin treading water in the crocodile-infested river. The shifting mud and slight current made his footing likely unreliable, increasing the risk of being pulled under. The attack came without warning. A massive saltwater crocodile, estimated over 15 feet, likely the same one his friends had spotted earlier, struck with devastating precision. Its jaws clamped around Elliot's left leg just above the knee with bone-crushing force, the serrated teeth penetrating deep into muscle and causing catastrophic leg trauma, resulting in massive arterial bleeding. Elliot's scream of shock and agony echoed across the water as the crocodile began its death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and tear away chunks of flesh. The muddy water around Elliot was stirred and streaked with blood near the surface as arterial blood pumped from the massive wound. Each rotation of the death roll drove the crocodile's teeth deeper, crushing bone and shredding tissue. Elliot's desperate attempts to fight back were futile against the reptile's immense strength and prehistoric killing efficiency. His friends on shore watched in horror, shouting frantically, but unable to enter the water without becoming victims themselves. Within minutes, catastrophic arterial bleeding from the mangled leg had weakened Elliot beyond any chance of escape. The crocodile, maintaining its grip, dragged him briefly toward deeper water near the attack site in a final, violent thrash. Bubbles and blood marked the spot where he disappeared, the muddy water quickly obscuring any trace of the struggle. One of his friends immediately called emergency services on his satellite phone. The rescue helicopter arrived 23 minutes later, but by then the river had returned to its deceptive calm. Recovery operations located remains several hours later, still bearing the massive puncture wounds from the crocodile's teeth. The coroner's report listed the cause of death as exsanguination due to crocodile-inflicted trauma, with drowning as a contributing factor. They never found the crocodile responsible. The incident received minimal coverage in local media, treated as another preventable tragedy involving alcohol and ignored safety warnings. Additional warning signs were installed along the riverbank, and Elliot's family held a private funeral in Catherine, where he was remembered as a skilled mechanic. The crocodile-infested waters of Australia claimed another victim. Meanwhile, in Asheville, a construction worker's need to prove his dominance would lead him to place his bare hands on the back of a wild black bear, mistaking its momentary tolerance for submission. It was October 14, 2017, when the autumn leaves of downtown Asheville painted Pack Square in brilliant oranges and reds. the same colors that would soon stain the pavement as Derek Katz made the final mistake of his 37 years. Derek was a man who had built his reputation on never backing down from anything. As a construction foreman for Mountain Ridge Development, he was known for taking on the most dangerous jobs, scaling half-finished high-rises without safety harnesses, working with heavy machinery in conditions that made other workers nervous. He had moved to Asheville from Detroit 5 years earlier, seeking the outdoor lifestyle. That particular Saturday, Derek had come to the farmer's market to meet his girlfriend, who sold handmade jewelry at a booth near the courthouse. When the bear first appeared at the edge of the square, most vendors and shoppers began backing away slowly, following the shouted instructions of an off-duty park ranger who happened to be browsing the vegetable stands. Black bears, despite their fearsome reputation, are generally timid creatures that avoid human contact. Adult males can weigh up to 600 pounds and run at speeds of 30 miles per hour, though they are generally timid and avoid humans. Bears habituated to human food sources can be unpredictable and dangerous. Their powerful jaws can exert 800 pounds of pressure per square inch, and their claws, designed for climbing and digging, can inflict devastating wounds. The female park ranger immediately began directing people to move away from the bear while calling for backup on her radio. She shouted warnings about maintaining distance and not making sudden movements. Several vendors began securing their food displays, knowing that the bear was likely attracted by the smell of fresh bread, honey, and produce. The bear, a young male estimated at around 250 pounds, moved slowly through the square, occasionally stopping to investigate overturned trash cans. The park ranger said that she noticed the bear's relaxed posture and lack of aggressive signals. She estimated that if people maintained their distance, the bear would likely wander back toward the wooded areas surrounding downtown within minutes. Derek, however, saw an opportunity rather than a danger. As the crowd retreated, he stepped forward, ignoring the ranger's direct orders to stay back. He announced loudly that he knew how to handle bears, that this was just a small one, and that everyone was overreacting. The bear, now about 30 feet away, looked up from a spilled container of apple cider, making brief eye contact with Derek before returning to its investigation. The ranger shouted specifically at Derek to stop moving toward the animal, explaining that bears could charge without warning. Other bystanders joined in the warnings, but Derek waved them off dismissively. What happened next unfolded with shocking speed. He walked steadily toward the bear, speaking to it in what he apparently believed was a calming tone. The bear likely perceived his approach as an immediate threat. When the animal finally looked up, its body language shifted immediately, ears flattening against its head, a clear warning sign. The bear rose slightly on its hind legs, another defensive posture that Derek misinterpreted as curiosity rather than the threat assessment it actually was. Derek reached out and placed both hands on the bear's back, apparently attempting to guide it toward the tree line. The bear responded with rapid, forceful bites and short raking motions designed to repel a perceived threat. Its massive head swung toward Derek's extended arm, and the animal's jaws clamped down with crushing force, breaking bones and tearing muscle tissue. Derek's scream cut through the air as the bear's teeth punctured through muscle. The bear responded instantly, delivering a rapid defensive burst of bites and raking strikes lasting only seconds. Derek's attempts to pull away only worsened the damage. When the animal finally released him, Derek stumbled backward, his mangled arm hanging uselessly at his side, blood pouring from multiple puncture wounds. The bear, having neutralized what it perceived as a threat, calmly turned and began walking toward the nearby French Broad River. His girlfriend's screams for help were immediately answered by the ranger, who radioed for emergency medical services while applying pressure to Derek's wounds with her jacket. The arterial bleeding was severe, and Derek's face had already begun turning pale from blood loss. Other bystanders formed a protective circle, keeping the area clear while the ranger worked to control the hemorrhaging. Police arrived and rapidly cleared the square to maintain scene control. Derek remained conscious but was going into shock. A nurse practitioner who had been shopping assisted the ranger with first aid. Paramedics arrived 9 minutes later, finding Derek in severe hemorrhagic shock. Despite their efforts to stabilize him during transport, he suffered cardiac arrest in the ambulance and was pronounced dead at the hospital. The coroner's report listed the cause of death as exsanguination due to severe vascular damage and tissue destruction, leading to uncontrolled hemorrhage, with contributing factors of shock and cardiac arrest. The bear was later euthanized due to human fatality involvement. His family, embarrassed by the circumstances and his public disregard for safety warnings, requested that no memorial service be held and declined all media interviews, as the crowded park in Asheville witnessed one man's fatal need to prove his dominance. In India, a boy's innocent desire for ripe mangoes would trigger a vicious swarm attack, that no amount of parental warnings could have prevented. It was March 23, 2018, in the ancient stones of a temple complex in Jaipur. 12-year-old Rohan Cheta would discover that the sacred monkeys his grandmother had told him stories about were far more dangerous than any childhood tale suggested. Rohan was the son of a textile merchant from Mumbai. He possessed an insatiable curiosity that both delighted and exhausted his parents, Vikram and Priya. The family had come to Jaipur for his cousin's wedding, and Rohan had begged to visit the famous monkey temple after hearing stories from relatives about the hundreds of rhesus macaques that lived there. His parents had agreed reluctantly, knowing their son's tendency to ignore boundaries when something captured his interest. He had secretly packed a small bag of peanuts in his pocket, planning to feed them despite his parents' warnings about maintaining distance. The family arrived at the temple just after noon, when the heat was beginning to drive most tourists to seek shade. The temple complex echoed with the constant chatter and screeching of over 300 rhesus macaques that had claimed the site as their territory. These animals are highly intelligent primates that possess canine teeth over half an inch long, designed for both defense and establishing dominance within their social hierarchy. These monkeys live in complex troops with strict pecking orders, and they become extremely aggressive when protecting food sources or when they perceive threats to their territory. The temple priests had posted signs in Hindi and English warning visitors not to carry visible food and to avoid direct contact with the monkeys, but the warnings were faded and partially obscured by years of monsoon damage. A local guide had specifically warned the Cheta family about the monkeys' aggressive behavior during feeding time, explaining that they had become increasingly bold and territorial due to years of tourist feeding. Vikram had listened carefully and instructed Rohan to stay close, but the boy was already distracted by the sight of monkeys swinging from temple spires. The guide positioned himself to intervene immediately if Rohan approached the monkeys, but was momentarily distracted by another group of tourists taking photographs. As the family moved through the complex, Rohan spotted a cluster of ripe mangoes that had fallen from trees near a water tank, where a large troop of monkeys had gathered. The fruit lay just outside what appeared to be the main feeding area, and several smaller monkeys were already investigating the windfall. Despite his father's firm grip on his shoulder, Rohan broke away when Vikram stopped to photograph a carved elephant statue. The boy moved quickly toward the mangoes, ignoring his mother's sharp call to return immediately. The monkeys nearest to the fruit immediately noticed his approach, their posture shifting from relaxed foraging to alert surveillance. What Rohan failed to recognize were the clear warning signs the monkeys were displaying. The largest male, a scarred veteran of countless territorial disputes, began making low, grunting sounds while staring directly at the approaching child. Other troop members started gathering behind their leader, a behavior that indicates preparation for group defense of resources. However, only a few monkeys were likely to physically engage, with the others mainly blocking the child or attempting to snatch food. When Rohan reached down to grab the largest mango, he unknowingly triggered the alpha male's protective instincts. The attack began with the alpha male's piercing shriek, a sound that immediately drew attention. The first monkey landed on his back, its claws digging through his cotton shirt and into his skin. The boy's startled cry was cut short as the alpha male bit down on Rohan's right hand, its canine teeth puncturing the flesh between his thumb and forefinger. Secondary monkeys attempted to snatch the mango and scratch at him. The assault was chaotic. Monkeys clung to his arms and torso, their teeth finding exposed skin with biting and clawing that caused scratches and punctures. Blood began flowing immediately from multiple wounds. His attempts to shake them off only caused deeper scratches as their claws raked across his skin. The alpha male maintained its grip on his hand, shaking its head violently and causing serious tissue damage to fingers and palm. Within 30 seconds, Rohan had sustained over 10 to 15 significant bite wounds, focused primarily on his hand and arms, with smaller lacerations on his scalp and shoulders. He fell backward and struck his head on a nearby stone step, rendering him unconscious. Other monkeys retreated when they sensed the threat from other humans approaching. Vikram and Priya reached their son, just as the temple priest arrived with a long wooden staff. The priest's aggressive shouting and the staff's threatening gestures drove the alpha male and nearby monkeys back into the trees. Rohan lay unconscious, his hand mangled and deep lacerations visible on his arms and scalp. Priya's anguished wails brought other visitors running. The priest immediately called the local medical clinic and police using his mobile phone. An ambulance arrived 12 minutes later, but paramedics found Rohan unresponsive with significant head injuries. Rohan survived long enough to reach intensive care, but brain swelling from head trauma and secondary infection from bite wounds claimed his life days later. The coroner's report identified head trauma from a fall as the immediate severe injury. Secondary infection from untreated bite wounds was noted as a contributing factor, alongside severe intracranial swelling caused by the fall. A local newspaper ran a brief warning about monkey aggression at local temples, and the temple management installed additional fencing around feeding areas and posted more prominent warning signs in multiple languages. The incident prompted discussions about controlling the monkey population at religious sites, but no significant action was taken due to the animal's protected status in Hindu tradition. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here.